Welcome back to Chicago Independent Television. Pollution and its related problems are huge concerns in urban areas like Chicago. Green space helps alleviate these harmful effects and provides neighborhoods with critical public space. Next, we'll see an inspiring story of a local Chicago community's effort to create much-needed green space and their struggle against a developer who wants to turn that green space into a parking lot.
On August 7, 2007, Chicago activists staged a peaceful protest at Mayor Daley's office to draw attention to their efforts to save the Cesar Chavez community garden, which may turn into a parking lot. The garden lies between the expressway and a residential area in the Pilsen neighborhood, creating a vital green barrier to the noise, heat, and pollution that the expressway causes. It was formerly a junkyard that looked more like this empty lot across the street.
The garden was a big lot of gravel, dirt. There was no grass, no trees, nothing. And my mother started the garden along with other community members. We did get permission. We were given a letter by the mayor.
We had an agreement that this space would be left as green space as long as the community showed interest and would still be part of it and keeping it clean.
Y unidos empezamos a invitar a la gente de la comunidad y a limpiar y ya empezamos a ver los arbolitos crecer, a poner flores. Yo siempre limpiaba y cortábamos el pasto, los árboles, con nuestros propios recursos.
I was younger back then, and I was back in college when the residents started taking care of the garden, mowing the lawn, planting flowers, planting trees. All the trees that are actively at Cesar Chavez Community Garden have been planted by the community residents.
But in 2007, after 12 years of maintaining the space, residents were confused when some uninvited landscapers arrived at the garden.
We were cutting the grass on a Thursday, and there were big trucks of landscapers coming in. They said they were sent by the owner. We had no idea who this owner was, and so they directed us over to an office on Halsted Street. We walked over there, and that's how we found out that John Podmajersky had bought this land.
Me fui a la oficina del señor Solís, nunca me atendió porque estaba muy ocupado. Hablé con Roberto Montaño, el cual pues al principio me atendió muy bien, me dijo que iba a investigar. Para el viernes, el señor Podmajersky y el señor Montaño, Roberto Montaño, estuvo en el jardín por la tarde. Pero con una cosa como burlona me dijo, soy el dueño y no tienes nada que hacer aquí.
Our trees were being torn down, our flowers were pulled out and thrown to the sidewalk, and we had no idea why this was happening.
One resident showed me these photos from the day the landscapers tore the flowers out of the garden in front of the children who had planted them.
The community was surprised because it wasn't made public, and we had been maintaining it for so long, and we just felt like heartbroken that they had future plans that might be like parking lot or reducing the green space.
John Podmajersky III, who owns over 150 buildings in Pilsen, says he needs this space to build a parking lot for 3 residential buildings he is going to rehab. 10 years ago, he tried to buy the space for the same purpose, but was blocked by community opposition. Even though the garden has been praised and supported by Friends of the Parks, the Chicago Horticultural Society, Open Lands, Chicago Botanic Garden, the Archdiocese of Chicago, and a wide variety of other groups, Podmajersky has called the garden blighted and referred to it as an eyesore. But the garden is not nearly as blighted as this unused empty lot, which not only is closer to Podmajersky's proposed development, but already belongs to Podmajersky himself.
It used to all belong to the Park District. He convinced the Alderman's office that it was needed for parking before the businesses on Halsted, and now you can see what's happened to it. I mean, it's been fenced off, and no one parks here.
Resident Judy Shutway has lived in Pilsen for 24 years. She walked me through the surrounding area and showed me one empty building after another, all owned by Podmajersky. She told me that these buildings used to be filled with tenants, and there used to be a waiting list to live here.
This was the Salvation Army, and we loved having the Salvation Army here, but he did not want that element, so he asked them to leave. And that was so many years ago, and the space has been available ever since. He's never been able to put anyone else here, so it's been empty.
Shutway estimates that at least 1/3 of Podmajersky's buildings must be empty, or with only 1 or 2 units occupied. Podmajersky says he will include landscaping in his proposed parking lot to make up for the lost green space. But many residents wonder why Podmajersky needs to take a highly praised community garden at all, when he already owns so many empty buildings and several empty lots.
Él tiene tantas propiedades donde él puede hacer sus estacionamientos. Bastante. Entonces él, ¿por qué se encaprichó en ese lugar que tenemos nosotros tan bonito y que hay familias que lo necesitan?
The residents of Pilsen are still seeking attention from Alderman Solis and Mayor Daley. They're asking for your help.
We want Alderman Solis to pressure the developer, Podmajersky, to return the lots back to the city. Basically, that we get our garden back.
I want him to listen to the community. He should have pride in Pilsen. He's been here so long. He says he knows a lot of people here. Well, make it really known that you really care about the area where we live.
I'm Alejandro Molina, and you're watching Chicago Independent Television.
I see the soul of a nation. Must be true, 'cause I've seen it on TV.
About a year ago, Mark and I thought, air pollution, global warming. How can we make a difference? So Mark modified our car, some sort of homemade energy source.
The best part is the car emits only helium. Genius.
But the EPA says the energy we use in our home can cause twice the greenhouse gases of a car. So now I look for products that are in the Energy Star. Simple.
The EPA invites you to go to EnergyStar.gov to discover what you can do to reduce air pollution.
Welcome back to Chicago Independent Television. In September, Chicago hosted an official FCC hearing on the agency's controversial media ownership rules. But the panelists at the hearing didn't include any grassroots organizers or activists or workers. In this piece, we'll hear a grassroots media activist deliver what he would have said had he been chosen as a panelist.
As I speak these words, the Federal Communications Commission is about to hold a hearing in Chicago on an issue that I've been working on for years. And I had hoped that the FCC would choose me to be a panelist and give a full 5-minute presentation at this hearing. Then I found out that the chances that a grassroots media activist getting chosen for a presentation at an official FCC hearing are practically zero. But rather than be depressed by that fact, I've chosen to do something about that fact. I've written up what I would have said before the commission had I got chosen to speak at the commission's hearing on the issue at hand, that of media ownership and its concentration in the United States. And I think it would go something like this. May I have 5 minutes on the clock, please? Thank you. My name is Mitchell Szczepańczyk, and the main topic of this hearing is an issue I've been working on for the past 5 years. The issue is the FCC's controversial media ownership rule changes and its impact on Chicago's media. Should the FCC change America's ownership rules to make it possible for fewer companies to own yet more media properties? There are those who say yes, who not so coincidentally would profit from increased concentration. And there are those who say no, which includes everyone else and far outnumbers those who stand to profit. The FCC, ostensibly the public's guardian to enforce the public interest in media, seems more interested in serving the media than in serving the public. Indeed, those who serve at the FCC often leave the FCC to take on high-paying jobs in the very media they supposedly regulate. Worse, concerning media ownership, the FCC in 2006 has been caught suppressing its own research, which said that concentrated media ownership harms the public. How is the public harmed by increasingly concentrated media? Let me count the ways. I often list 5 common consequences that extrapolate widely. 1. More commercialism in media. 2. Less localism in media. 3. Less quality journalism. 4. Less independent music. And 5. Fewer diverse perspectives. In particular to Chicago, I would like to share some brief specific stories I've collected over the years that provide additional reasons for public harm. Story number 1. Chicago radio personality Rick Kempfer wrote a novel entitled Severance, which was a novel about media concentration. In a radio interview I had with Rick remarked that those who work in the radio industry do not have many options for radio jobs in Chicago, since fewer companies have come to own the stations which offer paid jobs. Story number 2. A community group named FUFA, Females United for Action, campaigned against the Chicago radio station La Ley over the station's sexist billboards. The campaign found out that La Ley was less responsive to Chicago listeners since the station was owned by a company based in Miami, leading FUFA to question why a Chicago radio station shouldn't be owned by someone actually in Chicago. Story number 3. Chicago Media Action, a group I'm involved with, has been working on media concentration since 2002. One thing that CMA has done to raise the issue of media concentration among members of the public was to inform the public and spread the word as a tactic to oppose media concentration. And overwhelmingly, CMA has had to use media outside of the major corporate media apparatus in Chicago simply because those very media have a vested interest in what we're working against. So what should the FCC do? I would offer the following policy recommendations. For one, leave the media ownership rules alone, or better yet, change the rules to reduce the number of outlets that a single company can own rather than increase them. Moreover, the FCC should more precisely define what it means to serve the public interest. After all, everything the FCC does serves the public, but there's no specific definition for what that actually means. And attempts to try to put that into tangible policy get strangled in the cradle by incumbent broadcasters and their fanged lobbies. I think that a tangible definition of the public interest is one good short-term goal. I can offer my suggestions for a definition, and I encourage others to offer theirs. At this point in the conversation, some cynics, both in high-ranking management within the corporate media itself, and even within oppositional movements, would respond back and say, so what? Even if you halt these media monopolies from growing, even if you enforce antitrust provisions and break up these media monopolies, all you've done is temporarily reversed an outcome which could at some point in the future become undone when these companies eventually later remerge. Just because you break up these companies, you still nonetheless leave behind the larger context involving markets and the profit motive. And I think that's correct. And the conversation is supposed to cease at that point because, to borrow Margaret Thatcher's infamous phrase, Tina, there is no alternative. To which I respond, Tina is bunk. There have been lots of proposals suggested for a better political economy. I even took part in a debate in February here in Chicago, which debated different models for a political economy beyond the oscillations of corporate monopolies and those more open markets which nonetheless eventually tend to reconsolidate. But to continue discussions along this path would veer us away from the topic of media, and with little time to pursue it. In the meantime, let me suggest 2 books in this vein: Babylon and Beyond by Derek Wall, and Economic Justice and Democracy by Robin Hanel. I conclude by saying, don't think for a minute that activism leads nowhere. Activism is the reason this hearing is even happening, and it's the only thing that ever made a difference in this world. I thank you for your time and attention.
You've been watching Chicago Independent Television, a project of the Chicago Independent Media Center Video Collective. The Independent Media Center is a growing worldwide network of media producers, journalists, citizens, and activists, working to put the media in the hands of everyday people and away from corporate and commercial interests. To learn more, visit our website at chicago.indiemedia.org. There you can find out about upcoming Chicago area events and how to get involved in making your own media, including how to help make this very TV show. Thanks for watching. See you next time.